My name is Krista Scott. I am currently a senior program officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and I am delighted to be here today to talk about CARE. CARE is the bolus of my work at the foundation, and it's the bolus of who I am as a person. I am a daughter, I am a sister, I have been an auntie for, have to do math, we're rolling over calendars, 34 years, and I'm now a mother and a spouse, a partner. And I am so glad to be on this panel today. And normally I think it's the role of the moderator to do this robust introduction of the esteemed panelists, but I often like to turn the mic back to people and ask them to introduce themselves. We have bios. I encourage you to read the bios. Everyone up here is an expert. But I would love to kick it off actually for you guys to introduce yourself briefly with this prompt, which is, what is important for us to know about you for this conversation today? And how do you identify as a caregiver? And we'll go down the row for introductions. Melba, can we start with you?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Hello. So nice to be here. Thank you for the invite. My name is Melba Marcela Henao. I'm everything that she is, and then some as a mom. So I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old son, and I'm a parent leader mom. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I have more, but I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to miss a beat. So
Please.
Let me read it real quick. So for me,
Yeah.
should I let them introduce themselves?
Is it part of your introduction for yourself, or do you want to come back to it in another question?
Come back to it.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and to be speaking with you today, and excited to be on this amazing panel. My name is Jennifer Chuguna, and I am co-CEO of a national nonprofit called Common Future that is focused on creating an equitable economy in a variety of different ways. I think this prompt is really important because it really allows, just us to bring our whole selves into this conversation, and I think that's really critical when we're talking about care. I'm a mother. I have an almost 4-year-old, before on Halloween. I have a 5-and-a-half-year-old. So my husband and I, we are in the thick of it with young ones. I'm a daughter who has also watched my mother have to be a full-time caregiver for her parents at the end of their life. And I'm also leader of an organization that really tries to think about how we design policies and benefits for other people in our workforce who are also caregivers. So I think there's just a variety of touch points and ways to think about this conversation, and really excited to kick off this way.
Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christine Beyer, and I'm currently the Commissioner of New Jersey's Department of Children and Families. And so what's important about that is really just that I have been spending the last 8 years focused on this population of caregivers in many different ways. But I think most importantly, my role is that of taking care of and being concerned about the 2 million children in New Jersey, their parents and families. And in addition to my own children, I'm a parent of 2 emerging adults, 19 and 24. And also, I would say, a caregiver for the 6,600 staff in the department, and thinking about what are their needs in terms of being able to do the work, wanting to come to work every day to do the work, how to support them in their position, as well as in their personal lives in that they're caretakers.
Thank you all so much for that. We're here today to talk about how to think about care and future proofing so that care and the care economy continues to be a vital part of what makes us great in this country. And more importantly, how we make sure that resources flow to those who are giving care all the time, regardless of where they are in that system. And so I'd love to hear from each of you, what does a truly future-ready care economy look like? And Melba, we'll start with you again. You can, yeah, get to it.
Okay, so for me, a truly future-ready care economy has to start in our public schools because education is care. Right now, 1 in 5 bright and capable children, many with high IQs and many with dyslexia, still can't read. Not because they can't learn, because they're not being taught the way their brains are wired to learn. This reality has caused deep pain for families like mine, families who have had to fight year after year just to be heard. The public school system often checks the box with non-existent IEPs or ones that fail in practice. Inoperable IEPs without substance and superficial results leading to ineffective solutions designed to blame the victims. Or in the fight, parents win the war, but they lose the child. It's a true total tragedy. Evaluations are inconsistent, solutions are inadequate, and parents are left exhausted trying to secure what should already be a basic birthright to read, a meaningful education. When learning is done with purpose, using evidence-based reading instruction like Orden-Gillingham, for example, the Orden-Gillingham methodology, children with dyslexia thrive. So, children with dyslexia thrive. Reading isn't just an academic skill, it's freedom. It's the difference between dependency and possibility. I've witnessed what happens when instruction finally meets the needs of the learner. It changes lives, restores confidence, and proves what's possible when education is rooted in science, compassion, rather than compliance. That's why we need reform, not just in how we teach, but in how we care for families. To future-proof our care economy, we must educate the whole child and support the whole family. We all know about pipeline to prison, right? We've all heard that before, right? Okay. The two-generation approach gets it right. When the parent thrives, children thrive, and vice versa. Access to higher education for both student, parent, and child moves families out of poverty and into lasting stability. When student parents are empowered to learn and grow, the children's possibilities expand too. A resilient care economy means treating education as infrastructure, built with accountability, equity, and partnership with families at the center. Parents already know the solutions to their problems. We really do. What we need are systems that listen and truly deliver on the promise of learning for every child. When we build that foundation, we don't just prepare for the future, we protect it. Thank you.
Thank you, Melba. That's absolutely great. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say it's comprised of 3 things. The first is recognition that care is really a value, and we see it reflected in our infrastructure, in our investments, and our policies and practices. Care and access to adequate resources are not just based on where you happen to live or where you happen to work. I think the second thing is there's a recognition of what people need across the human life cycle. And so it includes things like quality healthcare access, paid parental leave, adequate postpartum care. It includes safe places for children in their infancy throughout their developmental life cycle. So that's early child care, pre-K, quality after-school programs, summer programs. We know a lot of these do not align with the workday, and so there's a lot of trade-offs and choice points and things that put families in precarious positions, so it's that recognition. And there's also the recognition of the supports and resources that families need as people age, and enabling them to age with dignity and with care. For example, I have so many peers. I'm a millennial, and it's not specific to our generation, but I have so many peers that are caring for young children and aging parents. And it takes a physical toll, it takes a mental toll. And so when we recognize care as a value, we really work to alleviate, these kinds of norms that exist in our society. And I would say the third thing is really about the workforce, the people who choose care as their profession and their career, and they're called to do this work. And it's a recognition through paying them appropriately so that they're also able to care for their families and their families can thrive. And it's not something where any of these are a trade-off. It's about making sure that all of these are true and exist at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. I was listening to both of you thinking that I want to say yes and, because building off of what you both said, thinking about that the care economy is built on not just what we need as consumers, but also of the workforce, and it is birth to grave, and all of the varied needs that our family and friends and those that we're taking care of, or we need to take care of. But from the government seat, what I would say is that we see it, or I see it in our department, as kind of a fully integrated care system that is nimble, that relies on not just the staff within our own department or government, but that it's based on partnerships and the development of partnerships with philanthropy, with private sector, with families. Melba's stories and the things that she's talking about really hit home, because it's important that we're listening to the individuals that are most impacted by these systems or by the services and supports that are needed. And so having a future-ready care economy is one that brings our government, public, private, philanthropic partners, our university partners, as well as those with lived experience to the table. And I think we learned some of this after COVID-19 and what we were dealing with, how quickly we had to make changes and in service delivery, but then also what the impact has been on the care workforce post-COVID, and what people were dealing with both in their personal lives as well as their professional lives, and thinking about how do we continue to support this care workforce moving forward, because as you said, there are so many individuals that are caring, kind of that bridge for young children in their own personal lives as well as their parents or aging parents. At the same time, we're asking them to come to work every day and show up and be able and ready to care for others. And so I think we can't do that alone. It's not one sector or one industry that's going to do that. That there has to be a public-private partnership, and I think most importantly that workforce needs to be at the table as kind of lived experts as well as the families that we're looking to serve.
Thank you. So some of the things I heard come up is, one, the deep need for accountability, equity, and partnership within the care sector and across the care sector, not necessarily in silos, but how are we thinking about the systems, who they're serving, why they're serving them? Are we checking boxes in our system? Are we excluding in care, even in our definition of who needs care and why, people with disabilities? When we often talk about care and caregiving, we think about what is it going to take to get this person to work? when work may or may not be the primary reason we're seeking care. I'm thinking about respite care for families with people who have disabilities. Right? If we're thinking about children with disabilities in an education system, how are we meeting the needs of those children and their parents and caregivers in ways that are not just about complying with IDEA and Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or 504 requirements, but we're actually allowing them to engage and access curriculum. And then what does that mean beyond that when they enter a workforce? And what does it mean for people in our care systems themselves to be part of the solutions that we're creating from a policy and systems lens? What does that full inclusion look like? So we begin to then center the true needs of families in this country with the solutions we have in our government and other systems. And so with that, I'd love to turn to the question. You guys have mentioned co-creation, partnership engagement of those most impacted, those who use the systems we currently have the most, to create new or different systems is vital. And so what policies or bold ideas do you currently see emerging that are centering co-creation or shared power? And we'll start with Commissioner Beyer and work our way this way.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of the things that has been a hallmark of our administration these last 8 years, really focused on centering the voice of lived experience. Back in 2019, in 2018, when I first became commissioner, I embarked on a listening tour around the state and had the opportunity to hear from over 500 parents in about a 3-month period, and then continued to meet with parents and young people around the state kind of each year after that, as well as our own staff. And in 2019, we ended up creating within the department an Office of Family Voice. And that office was created specifically to center the experiences of the people that we are meant to serve and to work with them, building a shared leadership model. So it wasn't just about hearing what a parent had to say or hearing what a young person had to say or what their needs were, and then saying, okay, thank you for that information, and now we'll take that and we'll go back to our office and we'll figure out then what we're going to deliver to you based on that feedback. The development of that office really helped to, and through the development, I should say, of like leadership councils, parent councils, a dad's council, a youth council, resource parent council, but councils not, again, just in name and providing information, but we've developed a shared leadership approach to the work so that they are at the table identifying what their priorities are, what their challenges are, what they've experienced within the system themselves, of what their neighbors or children have gone through. And then we were working on and have been building policy initiatives and actually created legislation that the governor signed into law, things that were not anything that we generated at the department, but that were generated specifically from the individuals who experience the system and the service. And so that shared leadership is something that we have been working really hard to achieve. And I would say at least 55% of the initiatives or the work now where individuals involved with our system are that of shared leadership, where they're actually the ones doing the work. They get paid for the work that they do. They're meeting with senior leaders within the department as they're building out their whatever the project is or whatever the initiative is. But we have been able to make some pretty significant policy changes and practice changes as a result of bringing lived experts to the table in a way that, quite honestly, we just would not have done because we don't see the system or the services in the same way that the individuals who need that help or want that help do.
Yeah, so at Common Future, I mentioned earlier, we're a national nonprofit, and there's 3 core areas of work that we focus on. So the first is around changing capital flows, where we provide grants and make investments in partnership with community-rooted organizations that deeply understand issues of economic inequity and are working to address them. The second is we build power. And that means bringing together a cross-sector of people from across geographies and across issue areas to build greater opportunities for collaboration and co-creation. And the third is changing narratives, and that's really focused on not just speaking to the challenges in our economy, but also what the possibilities are and envisioning forward. And so one of the values that is deeply held for us as we're doing this work is really ensuring that the folks who are most impacted, by economic injustice are not just at the table or not just in the room, but are the designers and decision makers of the solutions, because they know firsthand, and can speak to what the challenges are as well as what would make it better. So that's a core way of working for us across our initiatives. The other thing is, one of the things that we're going to be launching to, really address this issue is a cross collaboration, what we call an action lab, where we're bringing together a group of folks who have been in care work, and that is their core focus, along with others focusing on other economic justice opportunities. So folks who are working on baby bonds, folks who are working on guaranteed and universal basic income. We believe that when we have greater opportunities to break out of the silos in which we usually work, we have more opportunity for our imagination and to think about the policies and practices and building the will towards some of the solutions we know will work for more people. And so when we talk about care, it's really critical that we have more people understand that this is a core issue in economic justice. It's not just one issue area. As you've heard in this conversation so far, it touches so many areas of our lives. It touches so many families in a variety of different ways. And so the more opportunity we have to build broader collaboration and bring more people together to grapple with how we make solutions possible, I think the better for our society. So that's one thing that we're going to be looking to do, is really that incubation of a variety of people together.
I'm just going to say, a lot of the programs that I seeked, they didn't really meaningfully help me. I still felt disregarded. I'm not going to mention them, but I did seek out a lot of programs for advocacy for parents that were looking for help for their children. And so I just kept getting the door slammed on me. So I don't know. I wrote, again here, I wrote something like support network and advocacy platform that gives parents the tools, access to information, legal guidance, and political allies who will pressure systems to do their jobs. Too many parents are bullied by lawyers, judges, and school systems that were meant to protect their children. And we need to organize a response, an advocacy group or an action committee that actually works, that teaches families how to navigate and challenge these structures. So I'm thinking about streamlining access to help, maybe through a hotline or a family action network, so parents can contact quickly to the right support and stop being silenced. And so, I don't know what to say, because it didn't work for me, so it's like you got to reinvent the wheel, because it's not working. These programs in place just, unfortunately, were dead ends for me. So,
thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for telling the truth. Too often we are expected to talk about things as they are, as okay, and sometimes they're not, right? And only when we can tell the truth about what's working and what isn't, can we figure out how to solve that. So I appreciate that. And we'll be talking, because I'm going to get names. For good and because accountability is important, kind accountability is important. But what I also hear is that there are techniques and ways that current systems can and should engage their constituents. And one thing that I wanted to name that I heard both of you talk about was paying people for their time, right? And bringing people together from the economic side of the house to the care side of the house. I think my experience is we expect people in the care sector to care so much about care that they don't have to worry about money. And that's true for parent advocates, right? Come, we want to hear your voice. And everybody in the room is paid except for them, right? So what I'm hearing is not only do we need to do better by meeting parents where they are in what their advocacy and issues are, right? Melba, am I hearing that right? We need to meet all parents. We need to find a pipeline for all parents to have their pathway to advocacy, however that looks. And when they find that path, we need to make sure we're investing in them, not just with tools that we think they should have, but the tools they ask for, and with money. Am I hearing it right?
Absolutely.
Am I missing anything?
Nope.
Okay, these are not my words, they're your words, right? So can we talk a little bit more in depth about what strategies or policy frameworks that you're seeing emerge that hold those principles and that seem to be working? And if the answer is you haven't seen anything, that's okay, because that's the truth, right? Sometimes we've got to tell the truth. But if there are things, I'd love to hear them, and anybody can answer.
So I do think that there are a number of things that are working. Unfortunately, not sometimes, all the time, government is slow, and it's why it's so important that we have partnerships with philanthropy or private partners that don't maybe have some of the same restrictions on them that the government dollar does. And yet, knowing that one of you had mentioned, kind of this idea of not just paying individuals for their time working with us, but also thinking about, what are the ways that we can engage differently or meet families, like what their needs are. And I think the best is when what the care workers, the workforce is saying matches also what families are saying, where they see there's a disconnect all the way around. One of the examples I think that is in New Jersey is our Keeping Families Together program. So Keeping Families Together is the largest supportive housing program in the country. It's right now the program began in 2014, and it was a pilot in 6 counties and served about 60 families. And in this administration, we have been able to expand that through the use of opioid dollars. And then we now have about 650 families housed throughout the state. What's important about that is it's a partnership with housing authorities, with so families have a housing voucher. So it eliminates the need for, the very high cost of housing in New Jersey. It's supported in that they are connected then with case managers, care managers that can help them get, these vouchers are probably 5 to 10 year vouchers. Some of them are lifelong, depending, so it's challenged depending upon where they are, what the family's needs are. But the goal is to really be able to kind of take that burden of the cost of housing off of the family, at the same time helping them to become not just employed, but employed at a living wage or go back to school to be able to get the education they need to be able to get higher paying positions, maybe then helping, giving them the opportunity to be able to spend time with their children on whatever the issues, like school issues, Melba, like, thinking that if you're working full time, the challenges of when the school is open or when you can have meetings with the school is sometimes challenged. So, but a program like that, I think, it's in some ways, it really does help with wealth distribution and helping families that are struggling. And it's not a direct payment to families, which, although I am a proponent of basic material, basic income, there that's something that I think government is going to be very challenged by, depending upon who the party in office is, depending on the amount of money. I mean, we know that guaranteed as cash assistance works. There's over 300 studies in the country to show that it works, and yet why are we not moving to that? Why is more government systems not moving to that? I think there's a lot of reasons for it. So programs like Keeping Families Together, where in many ways it is kind of a direct cash payment, it's something that families are saying they need because housing in New Jersey in particular is so challenging. The costs are skyrocketing and there's not enough of it. And that is not just kind of a government program, but we also have had philanthropic partnership. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation supported an evaluation of that, and so there's proof to show the outcomes for families, the better outcomes now for these 600 families as a result of participating. And just thinking about the other ways that we're bringing the care economy, the care sector into that through the supportive housing piece of it as well. So in some ways, that's I think a really good example of when government works well and is as a result of what we were hearing directly from families and also from staff saying that the number one need that families were asking them for was housing. And we could probably triple or quadruple that program and we still wouldn't be enough. That's how frequently it comes up, but I think it's a good example of what we're talking about.
I think, so one thing that I've been really excited about, and I think along similar lines, is just continuing to think about what it looks like when government and public infrastructure exists to provide options for families. So one example of that are the various programs that address early childhood education. So whether it's universal pre-K or other types of programs, and this is not to say that they're perfect by any means, but what I think about are just the dollars that it enables families to save and have other opportunities to build wealth. I was looking at Department of Labor statistics, and one of them is that families spend 9 to 16% of their income on full day care per child. And on average, that's anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000. Part of me was like, where? Because I would guess it's way more than that, for many people. But when I think about those dollars that families can use, towards buying a home, towards, other types of assets that appreciate, for some families, it may just translate into dollars that they're using to make ends meet when so many families live paycheck to paycheck and are just one emergency away from economic spiral. So I like to think about, the ways that dollars can flow when, there's public infrastructure for something and it enables dollars to translate into something else in a meaningful way for families. So that's something that's really exciting. I'm sure, we've all heard about, the example of New Mexico. So that's something that we're going to be watching very closely. And these opportunities to start with pilots, through partnerships with government, with philanthropy, are really critical to test these ideas and solutions and to be able to have a meaningful way to address, any barriers or flip side that emerges in those examples. But it's still really exciting to think about how we move closer to having opportunities for all families and moving away from the patchwork way in which care is delivered currently.
I think that if that is all good and great about the housing and the pre-K, and it really does help a lot. But like for parents like me, if like identifying parents like that want to go to school, want to be a parent student, and empower them is huge because it worked for me. So I can only speak for me, but I can only also imagine, for example, a family learning credit that can be contributed also, aside from money, because when a parent has money, they know how to make that dollar go far. So, it's trusting in that parent, believing in that parent that is going to make it happen, because parents really are the force of justice. And then, like, for example, one thing that I really did want to let you know is that sometimes the difference between a family struggling or succeeding comes down to something as simple as a timely screening. If I would have had that dyslexia screening, believe me, I would have been in a better position today, because I would have known early on what was the issue. And I know that there are programs that are doing wonderful with screenings, but when you're in the school systems, they don't follow through, and they drop the ball, and that's what happened in my case. So I believe in supporting the parent, student, wherever they are, and maybe making that even into a program that supports them. And I know with Aspen, we did a wonderful program for supporting the parent, student, and I think we should broaden it even more to the families that are in these programs that you've mentioned, and support them even more, because they will go far. Again, when the parent, I know firsthand, when you see your child thriving, you thrive, and vice versa. And I'm a perfect example of it. I went from barely making money to being able to hold myself in a very good career today, because I pushed that, and with very little resources. I don't even know how I did it. I just know that parents are capable of a lot.
Absolutely right. So what I'm hearing is it's not any one thing, right? It's not the or of any one solution. It's the and of all of them, and the way that they need to talk to each other and have a base in accountability with the users. That's what I'm gathering. Is there anything from that reflection you would add or take away or amend, friendly amendments or unfriendly ones?
The only thing I would add, I agree with you, and I would say the other thing that I think we need to be paying attention to is, like, when we're thinking about policy and the creation of policy, and that's not just, I'm sitting in this seat today and so I get to make the policy today. It's when we're talking about future proofing, right? It's not just who's sitting in government today, or who's the governor today, or who's the president today, but we all have an opportunity, like across all sectors, to really be working more collaboratively around what are those policy levers that we want to push. Maybe you don't have the ability with who the governor is today to get your policy, advanced, but maybe you will in a year or 2 years or 4 years. But having the plan and bringing all sectors together, so it's not just government plan, or it's not just the providers who are advocating for something for themselves. And it's why it's so important to have families at the table, because my experience has been that the legislators really like to hear more from families and are more willing to actually move forward bills where there is more individual kind of parent support or youth support than hearing that the commissioner likes this bill or it's something, that we want to move forward. And that's a place where I think philanthropic partners and government can kind of work together and looking at what are best practices across the country, across the world, and being prepared and planful so that when the conditions are right, you can, move quickly on policy.
I would also say having really robust feedback loops so that there is always opportunity to not just hear, but really think about how we design and understand that this is an ongoing journey when we're talking about care. There's no solution that we design today that we can just walk away from because that's it, hey, we've solved it. There's gonna be ongoing information to inform how these systems are being experienced by families. And when I say that, I don't just mean the individuals and the families who are resourced to provide feedback in terms of the social capital, in terms of their resources, but making sure we have feedback loops that seek out parents, and families and individuals that these systems often miss or leave behind, because that's going to be really critical to making sure that whatever we design is also equitable, and so that we continue to have those ways of being able to serve all and not just a few.
Yeah, one thing I often think about is someone who was raised in one class and who now is experiencing life as an adult as a very different person. I'm a very different income bracket. And I think often that we tend to design systems for the family I grew up in, not the family I have now, right? Or they're designed to keep them apart from each other. And so as you guys were talking about those feedback loops, how do these programs change over time as we change so that they're adaptive to meet everyone's needs, not just the needs of the people that we think we're designing them for? Because chances are that's going to look different tomorrow anyway, whether they're specifically for low-income folks or they're for high-income folks. We're always changing, and I think that's a really good prompt for me, and I'm going to sit with that for a while. I'd love to turn it over now, and does anybody want a last word before we go to Q&A?
Yes, just one last thing. I know, because I've spent time talking about the infrastructure, but one thing I want to mention too is that, I also approach this work as an employer, a leader of an organization, and we've really sought to, and we focus on economic justice, and it's not enough to just think about that as something out there in the work that we do. We really strive to model policies and benefits that are also a critical piece of this equation as well. And so I just also want to bring in, private employers into this conversation as well, because that's a critical role. Some of the things that we've done, are designed to touch people from a variety of places in which they sit. We operate on a 4-day work week, and we moved to that intentionally to give people more time and spaciousness, especially, during COVID, and we've remained with that. We provide a caregiver stipend, and that recognizes the variety of families as they show up. We do a 401k contribution, not a match, so even folks that are not able to do this on their own. So it's just really thinking about all the ways in which we demonstrate care that meet people where they are, and that is critical for employers as well.
Great point. Thank you for adding that. All right, we've got a mic runner, and just, I saw, the hands were so fast, so I'm glad you saw that. And if you could just introduce yourself and then ask your question. Thanks.
My name is Oni Patel. I am a working mom and a caregiver, and I just wanted to follow up on your point around employers and sort of the growth of backup care as an option. And a lot of the data for employers it's very strong that this is a good investment. To what extent are you guys working in that space, advocating, and how do we get more lower income women into jobs that actually have that benefit? Because I do think it is something that tends to be a corporate benefit. And then the flip side of that is just generally this is flexible work in the intersection of the care economy and benefits on the provider side. Obviously that is usually a job with no benefits. How are what are the roles in terms of like the private sector, if anyone's working with the private sector there? And then also I think women and other caregivers are choosing flexible roles and not building wealth, 401ks and all that. So it's a lot there, but just I think benefits in terms of like particularly flex benefits and backup care.
Yeah, I mean, for us, our work right now isn't focused so much on private employers because we're really thinking about like the public investments that need to be made and what that really signals to our society when it's seen as a public good that everyone should have. That said, like I mentioned, we are working to provide the variety of these things and not just on our own, but part of our work is modeling for other organizations the kinds of things that they can do. So I think all of the things, I think you mentioned earlier, Krista, it's not just one thing. There's so many things. So for us, we have a lot of parents on our staff. So I think the paid parental leave, the flexibility in scheduling. I've had a number of times where I've had to, say my kid is sick at school. I have to go pick them up. I'm the one that's there to be able to do that, or the doctor appointments, or with my mom, her having to take off of work to go tend to my grandmother, preparing her meals, all those things. So I think there's opportunity for private employers to do, but also share and model for others what the different options are so that they can better support their workforce as we also build the public infrastructure and the public will to better care and demonstrate care as a value system.
And one of the other things that you mentioned, I was thinking about from the perspective of financial literacy, and employers could be teaching more financial literacy for their employees. That's something that, sometimes people will learn it at home from their parents. I did not. My parents did not have a lot of money, and so there was no money to invest, or, it was my dad had a pension, and thank God for that pension when he retired. But that's now with my own children entering the workforce. I mean, that's a conversation that I'm having with my 24-year-old about how to save money and Roth IRAs. And if you start now, even a small amount, what does that look like, as you age? That's not something that I think many people feel comfortable with. It's not something, we don't talk about it in public, And so I do think that's a place where employers could be helpful for their young staff, for new staff, for thinking all ages, really. I shouldn't just say it's for new young staff. But it's like at that age is when, you're first entering the workforce, it would be helpful. But there are a lot of people who enter the workforce later in life, and circumstances force them into the workforce that they weren't expecting. And so I do think that that's something we should be paying more attention to. It will also help people build wealth.
So much. That's a great idea. And I think I had another question, but piggybacking on your question around just educating, financial education to our workforce. It's not the youths, it's not the middle, it's all. Because sometimes we as organizations, I always say we have people that work for us that can be our clients, like when you're working in non-for-profits, right? Because your budget is so limited that even though you want to pay a livable wage, right, and it's within your heart and your philosophy to do that, right? When you're getting funding, that your funding is so stagnant, right? The cost of living continues to go up, but your contract continues to see the same. It's kind of really difficult for you to raise those salaries. So then you should be teaching financial literacy and having different programs within your organization for your employees. So that's a great point that you brought up. My other question that I have just for the panel is around, having leaders understand how important it is to have those flexibilities, because normally you have leaders that are just looking at, I need to have this amount of ratio in the classroom, right? How do you get a teacher out of the classroom? It's like, how do I do that? I don't have another staff to put in the classroom if I have this teacher that needs to run out to attend to a child, right? So I think it's a cultural shift that needs to happen, and it needs to happen at a leadership level, right? We have to talk to leaders that are, you know, that are CEOs and EDs and VPs of organization and get them on board with this, you know, flexible scheduling, right, in the workforce, right? And just being human to our workforce, that life, right? And they may have to, you know, address certain matters. So just want to hear from you guys, like, what are some actionable items that can happen? Or even your HR, right? Because HR is one person who would push those kind of initiatives, right? How do we get folks in the room and actually get them thinking that way? Because we can say anything we want. If these leaders are not aligned with this, it's not going to happen within the organization.
Yeah, no, I think,
But please go ahead.
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a cultural and mindset shift. I think, you know, I mentioned earlier, like, we have to get more people in the room that touch a variety of areas, so we have maximal opportunity to, you know, influence the public will around this. The way that we've talked about it in our institution is, you know, we're a small nonprofit too. We've talked about building out our consultant bench, so we have people we can call on when others need to be out. We pay people an increased scope stipend when they're covering for other people in the organization. And so those are cultural shifts that we've had to talk about and normalize, and you know, be able to talk to other leaders. We've done that. Our HR folks have talked to you know, folks in HR at other organizations, because it's not effective if it just sits with us. We have to think about how we, you know, build a broader culture, and again, going back to that value system.
And I'll just be really honest, as someone who works in a large national health philanthropy, and its fund, it is the funder for the nonprofit sector, right? And I'm sitting here representing that part of our sector to say, yeah, it is challenging when you have a funder who looks at you for flat rates over year and expects a certain body of work from you for that cost of money. It can be hard when you're based in project-based grants to do innovative things for your staffing and your HR because of the way the funding structures are. So it's going to take philanthropy and other sources of funding, whether it's government or other places, to think through what their dollars really mean, what their dollar impact should and could be within the context of change in an institution, and how those dollars can be used to support practices that support the health and well-being of staff that are implementing the programs. That's my perspective as someone who makes grants. And so I have those conversations and I say, what is flexible funding? Flexible grant making and trust-based philanthropy are not just buzzwords to me. They are thinking through the real implications of my dollars, where they're going, what the context is, how much did I give you last year, and how much money am I expecting of you? So that when you're actually implementing the project grant, you can actually do it with fidelity in ways that align with the values you have. And I know that that is a huge boulder to push. So I'll just be truthful about that. And I know, having worked in early care and education at a child care center, who did actually have to put her body as a social worker in a classroom to make sure ratios are covered, when you have a sector that is constantly or underfunded from all sources of revenue, that's the question. And so it's not just, it is about the braiding and the blending. Believe me, we did that. We were both a child care subsidy program, a Head Start, and a private pay facility that was well-funded compared to others, and we still had staffing issues. And that's the core question in my perspective. If we believe that care is only as important as getting other people to work in more important jobs, and we fund it thusly, we're not going to have those solutions answered. So what are the changes we need to make from a narrative and an other practice level to shift our mindsets about the inherent worth and dignity of the people using those systems and the people baked into those systems, so that resources will flow more equitably from all sources so that we can do those things?
So apologies, I was a little tardy. I hope I didn't miss this part, but this question is for Christine. I know New Jersey has a paid leave program, and we saw somebody mentioned New Mexico coming online with childcare. I'm just wondering, from a state perspective, do you see really trying to to have advocates focus on state-based strategies where we can get maybe the three stools together for paid leave, childcare as public infrastructure, and even the care workforce for older generations. That's what we were working for so long on the federal level, and just wondering if, what are your thoughts about this happening in New Jersey?
Yeah, New Jersey has a lot of really good economic policies for families right now, and so I do think continuing to push in that direction is a good policy strategy. I think the challenge, New Mexico is not New Jersey, and the volume of people who live in New Jersey versus New Mexico is vastly different, and so I'm just keeping it real, like, will we ever get in New Jersey to a place where we have paid childcare for everyone? Not in my lifetime, right? Not while I just don't see how that happens, because if that was the only thing government needed to fund, right, maybe we would get there. That doesn't mean that it's not worth continuing to look at what are the strategies that New Mexico is employing, or other states around the country. What are they doing differently? What are the things how could we be using our state and federal dollars differently to be able to support new efforts, new initiatives, like in those spaces? So while we may never get to look like what theirs looks like, there's enough that could change and that we should be looking at. So yes, I think that's my answer, is we should continue to be like looking at how you can bring those things together.
I just want to say that, with childcare, if you could just keep it culturally where the grandmother, the aunt, the friend, and pay them, that would be so helpful, as well as making your hours hybrid, maybe remote or hybrid, because then the parent has that flexibility to design their agenda and their schedule, and it would make such a big difference. Like, if I had to design that it would work for me, because they need to get compensated, and they work so hard at any hours and taking care of the kids, and they're not getting anything for it.
Yeah, and I just want to tie that together to, I think, maybe what one of the earlier questions was, and to your question, is, the care economy the workforce is mostly women. And whether that's healthcare, whether it's social workers, nurses, educators, right? Like, all of what we're talking about is primarily women. Someone earlier talked about the flexibility and having, employers having more flexibility for workers, better benefits for workers. I agree with all of that. And what you were just talking about, like how parents would design childcare, is very different than how our childcare providers design it or want to define it. And there continues to be a really significant gap in our state, and I think probably states across the country, with what is it that parents need and want, when so many of the individuals needing those after hours, weekends, people doing shift work, they're primarily women. And well, I won't say that. I don't know the statistics on that. I would guess that they are
It's hard.
predominantly women, or single parents, right? So I think that's my point of, why co-creation is so important, and why we need to be hearing from the end user, and at the same time looking then to what are the best practices around the country or around the world that we can be looking at, bringing that information, and not just relying on the employer, right? Like, it needs to be everybody in the conversation, and I don't know that we've really truly gotten there yet.
We have 1:26 seconds. And I wanted to just see this. I'd love to end with you guys after the question, what about care brings you joy? Okay, so think about that while we're doing the last question.
Well, thank you for this very interesting discussion and for all the work you're doing. Believe it or not, I worked in the New York City school system as a school social worker for 32 years. And one of the educational models that I found really, really superb, and which involves the community and parents and puts parents on a career ladder as well, is a program called Follow Through. Have any of you happened to hear of that? It was an early education program, specifically focusing on first, second, and third graders. And different universities sponsored various learning models. And in the one I was in the South Bronx, they actually had parents come into the classroom to learn along with the children. And the children and the parents were put on a career level to become a paraprofessional and eventually a teacher. So the program proved very successful. We had a full-time nurse. We had a parents' room. I was there full-time. We visited every home of every child and offered them all kinds of resources and any supports they needed. And guess what? After 5 years, when it was proved successful, they withdrew the funds. So I am, shall we say, rebirthing the idea of this program, because I always say we do have the answers, but we don't put the money where our mouths are. So that's my final word. An old lady.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. Okay, we are over time, so I would love, and just as you feel interested in responding to my prompt, what about care brings you joy as we send people out today?
Gosh, it seems like that should be so easy to have like one word or one reason. What brings me joy is knowing that, an action that I take, whether it's a word, a hello to somebody, or a policy or a program that gets developed, any of the things in my everyday can make a difference for somebody.
For me personally, it's the love, just the love of family, and it just, I don't even know what more to say about that. And I think professionally, just seeing people thrive.
Well, when I think of care, I think of my son being in somebody else's care. So to me, it's just so vital that I can trust, and and that I'll be okay, that he's okay. And so that's pretty much it. I just want to trust and be at peace that it's all going to work out.
Thank you. And mine is connection. I find that care is the thing that connects me to others. And with that, I want to thank you all for being here today, for taking time to be with us and to connect with us and to think about care. And I wish you well.
Thank you.